The house was quiet, too quiet. Ethan stood in the dimly lit kitchen, his fingers gripping the edge of the counter so tightly they turned white. His mind raced as he stared at Claire's phone, its screen glowing like a guilty secret. A single text message burned into his vision. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place." His heart pounded in his chest. It wasn't the first time he'd suspected something was wrong. But this was proof. Proof that Claire, his wife of 8 years, had been lying to him. "Ethan?" Her voice cut through the silence, soft yet sharp. He turned to see her standing in the doorway, wrapped in a silk robe, her hair damp from the shower. For a moment, she looked innocent, almost fragile. But then her eyes flicked to the phone in his hand, and her expression shifted, just for a second, before she masked it with confusion. "What are you doing with my phone?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he held up the device, letting the weight of what he'd found sink in. "Who is he asked, his voice low but steady. Claire froze. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She took a step forward, reaching for the phone, but Ethan pulled it back. "Don't," he said, his tone harder now. "Just tell me who he is." Her face hardened, the mask slipping completely. "You went through my phone?" she snapped, her voice rising. "That's private. And this isn't?" Ethan shot back, shoving the phone toward her. The screen lit up again, another notification popping up. This time it was a photo, a selfie of Claire laughing with some man Ethan didn't recognize. They were close, too close. His stomach churned. Claire snatched the phone, her hands trembling. "It's none of your business," she spat, her voice cold. "You're never here anyway. Always working, always distracted. Did you really think I'd just sit around waiting for you?" Ethan felt like the floor had dropped out beneath him. "So this is it? You're cheating on me?" She hesitated, her jaw tightening. Then, without looking at him, she whispered, "I'm leaving you, Ethan, for someone who actually appreciates me." Ethan's days always followed the same rhythm. Wake up at 5:30 a.m., brew a strong cup of coffee, and sit at the kitchen table with his sketchpad, designing buildings that would never exist in real life but helped him dream. By 6:30, he was out the door, heading to his architecture firm downtown. The office buzzed with deadlines and meetings, but Ethan thrived under pressure. He loved creating something from nothing, turning blueprints into towering structures that people could live, work, and dream in. But no matter how late he stayed at the office, he always made it home by 8 p.m. sharp. Dinner was his favorite part of the day, or at least it used to be. He'd cook elaborate meals, experimenting with recipes he found online, hoping to impress Claire. Sometimes she joined him in the kitchen, laughing as he burned garlic or oversalted the pasta. Those nights felt like magic, fleeting moments when everything seemed perfect. Lately, though, dinner had become a silent affair. Claire barely touched her food, pushing it around her plate while scrolling through her phone. When Ethan asked about her day, she gave short answers. Fine, busy, nothing special. Her eyes rarely met his anymore. It was like she was slipping away, piece by piece, and he didn't know how to stop it. Claire's routine couldn't have been more different. Mornings began with yoga classes at the upscale studio near their house, followed by hours spent shopping or meeting friends for lunch. She filled her afternoons with Pilates, spa appointments, and business meetings that Ethan didn't question. Until now. Looking back, he realized how often she came home late, her cheeks flushed, her perfume lingering faintly of someone else's cologne. What Ethan didn't see were the secret texts exchanged during those long afternoons. Adrian, the man from the photo, had swept into Claire's life 6 months ago, charming her with expensive gifts and promises of adventure. Unlike Ethan, who worked tirelessly to provide stability, Adrian lived for the moment. He whisked Claire off to luxury hotels, bought her designer dresses, and whispered sweet nothings that made her feel alive again. At first, Claire told herself it was harmless, a little flirtation to spice up her dull marriage. But soon the lines blurred. Adrian wasn't just a distraction, he became an escape. With him, she felt desired, admired, and free from the monotony of her life with Ethan. And yet, Guilt gnawed at her every time Ethan smiled at her or brought her flowers, just because. One evening, as Ethan sat on the couch grading blueprints, Claire stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She wore a diamond necklace Adrian had given her last week. It sparkled beautifully, but it also felt heavy, like a chain binding her to decisions she wasn't ready to face. "I deserve better," she muttered to herself, though the words tasted bitter. Deep down, she knew leaving Ethan wouldn't fix everything, but staying? That felt impossible too. Ethan couldn't shake the image of Claire laughing with Adrian in that selfie. It haunted him, replaying in his mind like a broken record. He tried to convince himself it was innocent, a work colleague, maybe even a cousin, but deep down he knew better. His gut told him the truth, and over the next few days he became obsessed with finding answers. Started small. He began paying closer attention to Claire's habits. She left the house more often now, always dressed impeccably, her hair perfectly styled. Her phone buzzed constantly, but she never let it out of her sight. One night, while she was in the shower, Ethan snuck into her purse. Buried beneath receipts and makeup was a crumpled piece of paper, a hotel bill dated last weekend. His stomach sank as he read the name of a luxury resort an hour away. The clues kept piling up. A lipstick-stained collar on one of her blouses, a faint whiff of unfamiliar cologne on her scarf. And then there were the lies, so many lies. When he asked where she'd been, she brushed him off with vague excuses, just running errands, or meeting a client. Each lie felt like a knife twisting deeper into his chest. One evening, Ethan decided to follow her. As she slipped out of the house in a sleek black dress, he trailed behind in his car, heart pounding. She drove to a trendy rooftop bar downtown, parking near a shiny silver sports car. Ethan watched from across the street as she stepped out, smoothing her dress. Moments later, a man approached her, tall, confident, wearing an expensive suit. Adrian. They embraced like old lovers, laughing and talking animatedly before disappearing inside. Ethan clenched the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. Rage boiled inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. He needed proof, not just for himself, but to confront her once and for all. Adrian chuckled, crossing his arms. "Is this some kind of jealous ex-husband routine? Because it's pathetic." Ethan turned to him, his gaze piercing. "Oh, don't worry, Adrian. You're next." He pulled out a folder from his briefcase and tossed it onto the coffee table. Inside were documents detailing Adrian's illegal dealings, the bribes, the forged permits, the stolen land. This should keep the authorities busy for a while. Adrian's smirk vanished. He lunged for the folder, but Ethan grabbed his wrist, twisting it until he winced. "Don't touch that," Ethan growled. "It's already been sent to every major news outlet in the city. Your empire is crumbling, Adrian, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Claire gasped, her face pale. You ruined him?" "No," Ethan said, releasing Adrian and turning back to her. "He did that himself. All I did was shine a light on the truth." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, playing a video clip. It showed Claire and Adrian entering a hotel together, laughing and holding hands. The timestamp confirmed it was recent. "You leaked this," Claire whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do this to me?" "Because you did it to me first," Ethan shot back, his voice rising. "You humiliated me, Claire. You threw away 8 years of my life for a man who doesn't even care about you. Did you really think he'd stay loyal once your scandal hit the papers?" Adrian tried to interject, but Ethan cut him off. "Save it. You're finished. No one will trust you after this. Not your investors, not your clients, not even your friends." Claire buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. For the first time, Ethan saw the cracks in her polished exterior. The fear, the regret. Part of him wanted to feel sorry for her, but he couldn't. Not after everything she'd done. "This isn't over," Adrian spat, his voice trembling with rage. "I'll fight back. I'll sue you for slander, for invasion of privacy." "Go ahead," Ethan interrupted, smirking now. "But remember, I've got enough dirt on you to bury you 10 times over. Try anything, and I'll make sure the whole world knows exactly who you are." With that, Ethan turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused and glanced back at Claire. "Goodbye, Claire. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. But don't expect me to pick up the pieces when it all falls apart." As the elevator descended, Ethan felt a strange sense of relief. The anger that had consumed him for months began to fade, replaced by something quieter. Emptiness, perhaps, but also clarity. He had done what he set out to do. Now it was time to move on. Weeks passed, and the fallout from Ethan's revenge rippled through their lives like a storm. Adrian's empire crumbled under the weight of scandal. Investors pulled out, lawsuits piled up, and his name became synonymous with corruption. He disappeared from public view, retreating to some remote estate rumored to be funded by offshore accounts. But no amount of money could erase the damage done. Claire fared no better. The viral photos and gossip columns painted her as a gold digger who had betrayed her husband for fleeting luxury. Friends stopped returning her calls, and acquaintances whispered behind her back at social events. Even Adrian distanced himself, too preoccupied with saving what little remained of his reputation. Alone and humiliated, Claire moved out of the penthouse and into a modest apartment, trading designer dresses for thrift store finds. Ethan, meanwhile, began rebuilding his life. At first, he struggled with the emptiness revenge left behind. It was strange. After months of obsessing over Claire and Adrian, he found himself missing the simplicity of his old routines. The late-night sketches, the quiet dinners, the dreams of creating something meaningful. Slowly, he returned to those things, rediscovering pieces of himself he thought were lost forever. One evening, as he sat on a park bench sketching the skyline, a woman approached him. Her name was Mia, an art curator who had admired his architectural designs at a recent exhibition. She complimented his work, and they struck up a conversation that lasted hours. Unlike Claire, Mia appreciated Ethan for who he truly was, not for what he could provide, but for his passion and creativity. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen. As weeks turned into months, Ethan realized revenge hadn't healed him. It had only cleared the way for new beginnings. He still thought about Claire sometimes, wondering if she regretted her choices or if she'd found happiness elsewhere. But those thoughts no longer consumed him. Instead, he focused on moving forward, embracing the future rather than dwelling on the past. In the end, Ethan understood that true redemption came not from punishing others, but from forgiving himself. Revenge had been necessary, it had given him closure, but it wasn't the answer to his pain. What mattered now was how he chose to live the rest of his life. One rainy afternoon, Ethan stood in front of a mirror, tying a tie for a date with Mia. He smiled at his reflection, noticing how different he looked, not just physically, but emotionally. The weight he'd carried for so long was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose and hope. The doorbell rang, pulling him back to the present. As he opened the door and greeted Mia, he felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, it was about letting go. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt free. Over the next week, Ethan pieced together everything. He hacked into Claire's email account using an old password she hadn't changed and found booking confirmations for multiple hotel stays. There were love notes too, dozens of them from Adrian. Reading them felt like swallowing shards of glass. Finally, armed with evidence, Ethan confronted Claire again. This time, he didn't hold back. "I know about you and Adrian," he said coldly, tossing the printouts onto the dining table. Claire froze, her face pale. "Don't bother denying it." For a moment, she looked panicked, but then her expression hardened. "You had no right to go through my things," she snapped, snatching the papers. "This is private." "Private?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "You've been sleeping with another man under our roof, Claire. How could you do this to me?" Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. "Because I'm unhappy, Ethan. You're always working, always distracted. You don't notice me anymore." "That's not true," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I've done everything for you, for us. I gave you a home, security, love. And this is how you repay me. Claire shook her head, avoiding his gaze. I'm sorry, Ethan, but I can't keep living like this. Adrian makes me feel alive. He appreciates me. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan whispered, his voice trembling with anger and pain. If that's what you want, fine, leave. But don't expect me to just roll over and let you destroy my life. Claire hesitated, guilt flickering across her face. But she didn't apologize. Instead, she turned and walked upstairs, leaving Ethan alone in the wreckage of their marriage. The days that followed were a blur of anger, sleepless nights, and endless cups of coffee. Ethan couldn't eat, couldn't focus. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Claire laughing with Adrian, her hand resting casually on his arm. The betrayal burned inside him like acid, eating away at whatever was left of his heart. But beneath the pain, something else stirred. A cold, calculating resolve. Ethan wasn't the type to lash out impulsively. He'd always been methodical, disciplined. And now those traits would serve him well. If Claire wanted excitement, if she craved power and wealth, then he would show her exactly what those things cost. Revenge wasn't just about hurting her. It was about dismantling everything she thought she'd gained. He started by digging into Adrian's life. Using old contacts from his architecture firm, Ethan uncovered details about Adrian's business empire. On the surface, Adrian seemed untouchable. A successful real estate developer known for luxury condos and high-profile deals. But dig deeper, and cracks began to appear. Rumors swirled about shady transactions, bribes, and illegal land acquisitions. Ethan knew these whispers could destroy Adrian if exposed. His first move was subtle. Posing as an anonymous whistleblower, Ethan sent encrypted emails to investigative journalists, attaching documents he'd gathered through late-night research. These weren't just rumors. They were concrete evidence of Adrian's corruption. Within weeks, headlines exploded across the city. Real estate mogul under fire for alleged fraud. Reporters camped outside Adrian's penthouse, cameras flashing as he stormed past them, refusing to comment. But Ethan didn't stop there. He wanted Claire to feel the full weight of her choices. While Adrian fought to salvage his reputation, Ethan turned his attention to her. He hacked into her social media accounts, planting breadcrumbs that hinted at her affair. A cryptic status update here, a tagged photo there. It wasn't enough to confirm anything outright, but it planted seeds of doubt among their mutual friends. Then came the piece de resistance. Ethan hired a private investigator to tail Claire and Adrian, capturing incriminating photos of their secret meetings. Armed with this ammunition, he leaked the images to a gossip blog, ensuring they went viral. Overnight, Claire became the talk of every dinner party and office break room. Her polished facade cracked under the scrutiny, and soon, even her closest friends began distancing themselves. As the scandal unfolded, Ethan watched from the shadows, savoring each victory. Yet, despite the satisfaction, a part of him felt hollow. Revenge didn't erase the pain. It only masked it. Still, he pressed on, determined to see his plan through to the end. One night, as he sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, Ethan stared at a photo of Claire and Adrian together. Their smiles mocked him, reminding him of everything he'd lost. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Was this really worth it? Could revenge ever bring peace? But then he remembered the way Claire had looked at him during their final argument. Cold, unapologetic, as if he meant nothing to her. That memory reignited his fury. No, he told himself, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about making sure Claire understood the consequences of her actions. With renewed determination, Ethan began planning the final phase of his scheme, a confrontation that would leave no room for escape. He knew exactly where to find them. Adrian's lavish penthouse, a symbol of everything Claire had chosen over him. It was time to bring the battle to their doorstep. The night of the confrontation arrived, and Ethan felt a strange mix of calm and adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, ensuring every detail was flawless. Tonight, he would face Claire and Adrian, not as the man they betrayed, but as someone who held all the cards. Dressed in a sharp black suit, Ethan walked into the lobby of Adrian's luxury high-rise. The doorman barely glanced at him. Ethan had already bribed the staff to let him pass unnoticed. As the elevator climbed to the penthouse floor, he clenched his fists, rehearsing the words he'd say. This wasn't just about exposing their affair. It was about making them feel the weight of their choices. When the doors opened, Ethan stepped into a world of opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city skyline, bathed in golden twilight. Expensive art adorned the walls, and crystal glasses sparkled on a marble countertop. Adrian stood near the bar, pouring champagne, while Claire lounged on a leather couch, scrolling through her phone. They looked like royalty, untouchable, invincible. "Claire," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Both heads snapped up, surprise flashing across their faces. "Adrian." For a moment no one moved. Then Adrian set down the bottle with a smirk. Well, look who decided to crash the party." Ethan ignored him, his eyes locked on Claire. She looked smaller somehow, less confident than she had in those photos. Her hands trembled as she placed her phone aside. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" she asked, her voice wavering. "I think you know why I'm here," he replied, stepping closer. His tone was icy, devoid of emotion. "You wanted excitement, didn't you? Adventure? Let's see how far it gets you now."